What the hell happened with the San Francisco Shock this week, guys? What the hell happened with the San Francisco Shock? I only have questions about what's going on here. Today we say goodbye to Striker.
I very much love Striker as a player. I rated him as the best tracer in the league.
Since joining us in 2018, Striker's been absolutely indispensable. Our back-to-back championships would not have been possible without his hard work. All absolutely true. Like, Striker, clearly the best tracer to ever touch the game at this point. The only player that was contesting him was Sabiorbi for the period of 2018. And then Striker far eclipsed him in 2019 and 2020. Who else? And Defran. Bro, shut the fuck up. Yeah. Why do I look at my chat? Prophet's tracer has been excellent, but he has not been competing with Striker for best tracer in the world. Don't start mentioning other tracers in my chat right now, because if you're going to tell me that Dante and Yaki have been best tracers in the world, you're not watching the games. You're not watching the games. Striker is head and shoulders above the competition if you consider the entirety of his tracer career. He's clearly been the best tracer in the game. I'm not going to look at my chat because they're making me mauled right now. Striker's also been on the team for a long time. He's a really long-standing member of the Shock. He's been playing with them for ages at this point. Throughout the whole of 2019 and 2020, and now 2021, he's been a mainstay in the roster for pretty much the entire time. Tracer's been there. He's had to flesh out his hero pool as well, pick up a lot of the long-range hit scan roles, that kind of stuff. I felt like his performance this season wasn't really as powerful as it had been in the prior two seasons. Especially when he'd moved over to more of the hit scan stuff, but that might have been a factor of motivation as well when you see that he has ended up retiring here. I'm wondering, first of all, what his motivations for retiring were. I wish that we had like interviews with these guys when they made announcements like this. It's something I've been thinking about pretty regularly recently. Why don't we have regular opportunities, press conferences, where when big events happen, journalists get an opportunity to ask teams, ask players stuff about this kind of stuff? Why is it always fucking shrouded in mystery whenever these things happen? In larger esports, you just simply don't have these moves happen, and you don't know why. You always hear from the player or the manager or the team or somebody giving a statement on this. First of all, I wonder whether he really is going to retire or whether he's going to move elsewhere. Obviously, the comparison is ANS moving to Valorant, but spoiler alert, he's back. But you could definitely see Striker moving on to another game, in theory. He's got incredible raw talent, and I think he's also shown real dedication and the championship ability. What does this do to the Shock? Clearly, this removes their tracer from the pool. But this season, they haven't actually been relying on Striker as much. In 2019 and 2020, especially in 2020, Striker's tracer was a difference maker. Whenever he came in and played it, he was just winning them games. They were essentially unbeatable when it came to 2020 control maps because of Striker's tracer. That hasn't really been the case this year. The metas that we've been in have not been tracer-centric, and even when tracer has been played, the tracer has not been the main component of the composition. There's been a lot more focus on like empowering the Winston or in the main melee, like getting value out of the Ashe, for example, instead. But mostly it's been like either Rush, where Tracer isn't played, or the Winston-focused double bubble meta. Shock themselves were kind of struggling with a long-range hit scan option as well, and Striker was having to juggle both of those, although not necessarily playing them all the time. I don't think if you look at the year so far, this move is going to change the Shock too much. If we do get into an incredible tracer meta, then obviously Striker is not available for them. That's a bummer. So far this year, a lot of the good tracer players, not the best tracer players, but a lot of the good tracer players have actually been people we would never associate the character with, never associate the hero with. Lip playing it for the Shanghai Dragons, Sparkle playing it for the Dallas Fuel. These are not players that you would have expected to pick up tracer. I think the game has developed at this point in 2021. I think the game has developed past the need for a specialist tracer, perhaps. I think that the players are probably good enough at this point that most of your hit scan players can play a competent tracer to even go up against the best tracers in the world. They're not going to be able to like clap them or tracer diff them, but they're going to be able to sometimes hold them in check or at least not feed on the role. Whereas that was never the case in the past. If you were putting people on Tracer in 2018, 2020, when they weren't comfortable on it, they were getting dominated. But this year, partly because Tracer has not been the focal point of any meta, though she's been played, she hasn't been the focal point, I would argue. I think it's taken some of the pressure off those people. You're seeing more people like Fleder or Lip or Sparkle who are more team-oriented. Oh, okay, maybe Lip wasn't, but definitely Fleder and Sparkle are just timing-based, trying to get value out of their the rest of their team and what they're setting themselves up for. I think the days of the Tracer specialist might be going away. But Striker was definitely the best. Now, as for who fills that in, I guess it would be Glister or Nero. And whoever it is, whoever they decide, needs to be practicing. Because you're probably going to see at least some Tracer being played in the Summer Showdown. Tracer is back out of hero pools. She's released. She's going to be used in some capacity. She probably isn't going to be the focal point of any composition, but we don't know that. You might still see like Tracer Ashe compositions with Winston Diva rather than the Winston Zarya, where the Tracer is a much larger component. And yeah, still you're pocketing your monkey really hard, but that you need that Tracer to be able to follow up on what's happening. And so that puts pressure on Glister and Nero to be able to fill in those shoes. Now, you might see ANS play it as well, but I don't think it's likely. Obviously, if you have like Tracer Ashe compositions, you want ANS playing the long-range hit scan as well. But okay, I wanna just spend a moment to just think about the legacy of Striker before I move on to talking about ANS. I really do believe that Striker was, number one, the best Tracer in the world, the best Tracer that we've seen in the game. And number two, a major component to these back-to-back championships. Like, I do not think it's an overstatement for the Shock to say our back-to-back championships would not have been possible without Striker. I don't think that's an overstatement. He won so many games for them off the back of his unbelievable Tracer performances. In 2020, he was almost single-handedly winning them team fights, it felt, at times when Tracer was dominating the meta, like in the main melee and then again in the Countdown Cup. He was out of fucking control. And this is a guy as well that sprung out of nowhere. If you remember in 2018 when he was first picked up for the Boston Uprising, no one had a clue who he was. I think he came from like Rock's Orcas or something. I think it was like the team that Geggery was playing for, and no one had any idea that he'd be that good. People started getting hyped about him in preseason scrims, and then he began popping off. And it wasn't just his Tracer as well, although his Tracer is obviously insane. But he has really become a very well-rounded player. He's been playing, Widowmaker for them. He's played, what else? The McCree at various different times. He tried to play Zarya for them. Do you guys remember? I mean, the Zarya was not a high point, but do you guys remember the all-Korean composition, all-Korean roster that Shock tried to run on control maps for the beginning of 2019? That was not a high point of his career, but okay, he tried. Yeah, all-Korean with Moth, you're right. Although, did they run Architect on Lucio for one of those maps? I can't even remember. Anyway, his Reaper was insanely good. The timings he would get on Reaper in the 2019 championship were just phenomenal. His Hanzo, yeah, also excellent. He's an absolute beast of a player. If we're talking about the best players to ever retire from Overwatch, would anyone be above Striker? Haksal? Ooh, great shout. Great shout. Prophet hasn't retired. I mean people who've actually retired. People like Miro and etc., Miro, Fissure, they're especially Miro, had his success so early on in the history of Overwatch before people got really good that you can't rank them in the same way. But I do like the Haksal comparison. Obviously, Haksal also peaked early in the game, but it's not like he went out looking washed by any means. Haksal could absolutely have carried on competing and still been a freak. Jaehong? Jaehong's in between Striker and Miro, I would say, where a lot of success early on, tapered off towards the middle portion of Overwatch, you can't rate him as highly as somebody like Striker. I mean, those guys were also instrumental in the development of certain styles of play, for sure, and absolutely would be involved in any Overwatch Hall of Fame. Miro, Ryu Jahong, these kind of people, absolutely. But I think Striker might be the best player that retired. I think it's up there with him and Haxal. The rest of the Vancouver Titans players also very good, but I think Haxal was the best of those players. Yeah, I think Haxal was the best of those players, and even Haxal I'm not sure I would put above Striker. I think they're very similar level. Reinforce? No, I don't think so. From talking about Striker's incredible legacy, the guy who's come back in to replace him in some sense, not directly one for one, but to fill a bit of a gap in the team. Oh, ANS follows me. I hit him with the follow back. I guess I was just egoing him for a while. Shock announced the day afterwards, and by the way, people knew about this behind the scenes because the Overwatch League posted a fucking produced video about it as they announced. So these talks must have been going on for quite some time. Obviously, they must have known that Striker was retiring. None of this stuff came as a surprise, I would imagine, to the people behind San Francisco. And they must have been in talks with ANS too. Now, before we talk about ANS returning to Overwatch, let's talk about ANS in Valorant, because that's where he went. ANS retired, went to stream for a while, then decided to try and pick up a career in Valorant. I don't know whether his heart was in it, though. I can't say that. I can't say that he wasn't motivated, because I don't know that either. But for me, the biggest difference, even though people like ANS and Striker and whoever else in Overwatch has incredible innate raw talent, what really got them to be good at Overwatch is that they grinded the fuck out of the game. You need that level of determination and hard work on top of your talent in order to go far. And you also have to have like a grasp of a click in your brain of like how the game works. So I think if ANS had really truly applied himself to Valorant, he probably could have been a top player. Absolutely. But either time or motivation were a factor. Certainly you could say time was a factor because he just wasn't even committed to Valorant for that long. But he was on the T1 Academy team. T1 has been having so many problems at the moment in Valorant. There's been drama around their roster. They recently released their IGL. Their old coach has been outing them for a bunch of like, I guess, like the players harassing each other and him not being able to keep it in check, and he lost faith in the management, and there's like a bunch of shit about the T1's, and that's their main roster, the one that they're putting all of their time into. So the T1 Academy team, I mean, fuck knows what they were even doing with those players. He didn't play a match as far as I'm aware. I never saw him play anyway. And now ANS has come back to Overwatch. If ANS is ready to come back, if ANS doesn't feel like pressured to come back because he's worried about what the Shock would do without him, or if ANS doesn't feel pressured to come back because he feels like he was failing in Valorant, if ANS is truly just coming back to coming back to Overwatch because he wants to play in Overwatch League again, then I welcome him back. This is the best move that he could have possibly made for his career. He was dominating the game in Overwatch. You are always taking risks when you move elsewhere. He was a fucking legendary player. He came in, he clapped in his rookie season, like unbelievably, the best long-range hitscan player that we've ever seen in the league, and then just dipped on a high. Absolute gangster shit. Coming back now, that is phenomenal for his career. I think that is a great move. As long as he's also solved some of the issues that he was experiencing whilst playing in the Overwatch League, because it's no secret, the guy was talking about it himself, that he was having difficulty with depression and anxiety whilst playing for the Shock. I'm not saying that it was the Shock's fault or anything, but he was struggling with his mental health whilst also playing. So that has got to be a priority for him coming back, right? And hopefully that is a priority within the Shock as well, to not have him play every fucking game if he doesn't feel like it or whatever. He might require some kind of slow integration. I don't know. At the end of the day, it's up to him. Whatever he feels like he's capable of doing, as long as he's reflective enough to be able to understand his limits and what he can push himself to do without suffering in that sense. Now, let's dig into what it actually does for the Shock. ANS is not going to play Tracer for this team. At least he's not likely to play Tracer for this team. There are better options. Playing Glister or Nero as your Tracer is probably going to be better, especially because they have more time to be able to dedicate to that role, whereas ANS is going to be their long-range hitscan player. He's easily the best long-range hit scan player on the team, and that's even though Glister, I think, is pretty damn good at it. Glister's pretty good. When it comes to an Overwatch League level, he's above average. ANS is the best. Hands down. He's the best. He will probably continue being, if not the best, one of the best this year as well when he returns. Specializing him in that role, which is something that the Shock have been struggling with. Anyone remember Violet McCree? Thankfully, Violet McCree will not be a thing anymore now that ANS is here, because he was playing McCree for them, Ash for them, Widow for them. He was even playing a little bit of Sombra and May and other things towards the end of the season. So he was starting to broaden his hero pool pretty spectacularly towards the end to the kind of roles that you would never expect him to be benching people like Rascal on. So he's, I think, though, that for the Shock, it's about getting ANS in a comfortable position where his mental health is good and he feels like he's in a position where he can dominate the league as he did do last year. And the other side of the coin to replace Striker is about getting either Glister or Nero. The safest bet is Glister, in my opinion, because even though Nero's probably played a little more Tracer than Glister has, Nero is also responsible for more of the flex picks. Now, you could flip that on its head. You could make Glister play the flex picks if you wanted to. Glister's hero pool is fucking massive. But it seems like at the moment they want Nero to play that. So whichever way they do it, though, one of the two needs to be able to pick up the Tracer a little bit. And I think it makes sense to try and rotate them a bit. So that you at least, if you want to run some kind of like Echo Tracer comp, you could with Nero and Glister. And they would both be still playing their comfort roles. So I would rather that. Sideshow just forgotten about Teo. I'm not going to take Teo seriously as an option for the San Francisco Shock until they do, because they have not fielded him seriously at any point. And Nero feels like a more fruitful option for them when they come to a Tracer. If Teo does play for them, then fair enough. I'll start taking him seriously as an option. But at this point, it just feels like silly speculation to say, oh, will Teo play? I don't fucking know. They could have been working on his role at any point, but it doesn't seem like they have. Teo did play a map. Yeah. But what is that? That's a map. That's not in the rotation by any means. Anyway, whoever they pick up on Tracer, it's going to be a downgrade. But an Overwatch team is not a mathematical equation. It's not like San Francisco Shock are a 95 out of 100 team. Losing Striker is -30. Adding ANS is +28. So therefore they will be worse. It doesn't work like that. It's not. People add and subtract different things when they are added or removed from a team. I think that this iteration of the Shock looks better to me, because the Shock were not struggling with... Well, let's put it like this. The Shock were struggling this season with finding a proper long-range hit scan player. And it felt like putting Striker on that role took him away from the stuff that he's more comfortable with and broadened his hero pool to the point where it was detrimental for him. You weren't getting the best out of Striker this year compared to 2019 and 2020. I mean, even compared to 2018, actually. This has probably been... Actually, no, because 2019 he barely played, to be honest. So even including 2019 in this is a little disingenuous, because he wasn't really playing during GOAT's composition that much. But when he actually did get playtime, this has probably been the weakest of his years, just because his role feels more diluted on the team. But, I mean, when he did play in 2019, he fucking slapped when he was playing like the Reaper and stuff. But yeah, 2019 is a bit of a different year. Anyway, I think this iteration of the Shock looks stronger, because it very clearly defines the DPS roles in a much more strict manner than they previously were. We knew that Striker was going to be playing the Tracer the majority of the time, but that didn't even hold up every time. Sometimes they had Glister in playing Tracer and they had Striker on long-range hit scan. That happened for a couple of maps, I feel. Maybe it was only one map, but it definitely happened at least once this season. So, you got strange stuff like that. Also, yeah, just having ANS occupy that long-range hit scan more clearly creates a niche for either Nero or Glister to carve out for themselves. And means that we shouldn't just have one person being on the bench the whole time. Unless Nero is good enough to pick up Tracer and everything else that he does, and he just does that. Now, if you have a much better long-range hit scan, but a worse Tracer, is that better or worse for you? So far this year, it would have been better. The hit scans have been more impactful so far this season than the Tracer players. In the main melee, it's more about, your Winston and coordinating with them, so the Tracer doesn't really have as high a potential to pop off. We did see pop-off moments from people like Yaki in particular earlier in the main melee, most of the time, the average level of Tracer impact was not as high as hitscan impact. And I think that's likely to continue unless this experimental patch comes through and it makes a large difference where when you're outside of your normal range as hitscan, it falls off to 30% instead of 50%. Personally, I don't think that's going to have a massive impact because most of the time people are picking heroes that try to play within their effective range instead of just poking people from miles away. And Widowmaker itself got buffed, which is ANS's best hero. ANS should be absolutely still popping off. Then again, Widowmaker's still nerfed since the last time he played it, isn't it? Because it's 175 health. Did ANS? I can't remember the timeline. When did Widowmaker get 175 health? Did ANS play with that? He didn't, right. In the playoffs was 200. Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I know he played ladder on it. I'm talking about whether he played matches on it. So Widowmaker has been nerfed since... I think the 175 health is squishy enough that you have to be cautious, more cautious with your positioning. So it is a nerf, but okay. Widowmaker is not in a bad position by any means. While Glister and Nero are unlikely to carry games on Tracer, I don't think you need to. I think that having a hit scan that can carry games and having a Tracer that can either just keep the other Tracer in check or follow up on damage from your Winston and coordinate dives, like as long as you're doing your job on Tracer, I don't think you need a player that can also fucking dominate on Tracer. Now, is the DPS line that they run this year going to be as good as ANS Striker last year? No, of course it's not. But ANS and Striker was like a cheat code last year on Tracer Ashe. I don't think this hurts the Shock by any means, and I think it might actually be a slight improvement for them. Maybe it'll take a moderate amount of time to get ANS integrated and stuff, but by the time we get to the end of the season, I would expect to see this San Francisco Shock squad looking even more dangerous than they did at the beginning of the season. Also, regarding the mental of ANS earlier, I've spoken to some of the Korean players like Piggy and Pelican, and a lot of them are just really homesick. That sucks for them with this COVID world state. Absolutely it does, of course. I mean, it's bad enough living in another country. Also, living in another country where you might not be able to see your other... So, when everyone lived in Los Angeles, not all of them, but let me be more specific. When everyone in Overwatch League lived in LA, a lot of the Korean players would meet up after playing games and scrims and stuff like that. And they'd meet up in Koreatown and they'd go out to Korean barbecue and stuff like that. And they all had like friend groups that weren't necessarily just of people in their team. They would meet up with other people as well, like the London guys hanging out with the New York guys. And we'd run into them at bars and stuff and be like, oh shit, you guys are all out just chilling. That ability to have other people near you that are going through the same kind of thing, like they're Koreans living in North America, is not available this year because the teams have all located in their own home areas. Or not all of them, but a lot of them have. So for somebody like Piggy, I mean, he's living in Houston, right? There's not going to be... I don't think there's a thriving K-Town in Houston where he can go... I mean, maybe there is, actually. I don't know. But there isn't really in Austin. Not to the same level as there is in Los Angeles, anyway. And there isn't the same amount of other Korean players from other teams in the same area that he can meet up with. Plus, he can't even get like a plane ride home to go and see his family that easily because of COVID. It's all a lot more difficult than even in 2018. And when we were talking in 2018 about people coming over, even European players, but especially Korean players, where the culture is so different and the food is so different and that kind of shit, it's got to be hard. It's got to be so hard. I don't know whether that specifically was what was affecting ANS. There's many different ways that depression and anxiety can manifest and many different causes of it, so it may not have anything to do with that. Anyway, I haven't seen this video, so I want to watch it. What is this? Instagram messages. 10% battery, you should charge your phone. March the 2nd. I wonder when they actually did start having talks with ANS about coming back to Overwatch. When do you reckon? If you had to guess, this kind of stuff easily takes a month to figure out. So I'm guessing minimum end of May. But I'm guessing it was happening for maybe a little longer. 1 week in T1 since the beginning. Instagram, you boomer, that's iMessage? Wait, is it? Yeah, I'm a boomer. I don't know. I've never used an iPhone. Look at his tracker.gg. Why? What? He might have still been playing Valorant ranked. Check the DMs at the beginning, some Easter eggs. Come on, man. I miss having you on the team. I bet Krusty would say yes if you asked. Oh, you mean these DMs? You mean this? Script is looking good this season. Good work. Please help. We're trapped in the apartment again. Can we get more beanbags in the practice room for me to nap on? Apparently, Violet falls asleep everywhere. What is this? Chengdu Hunters, Philadelphia Orange. Oh, it's an orange group. That's so dumb. Who needs to go to Hawaii anyway? Nice. Please let us get 5 maps next time so we can give breadsticks our fans haven't eaten in weeks. I love that. This is the last time I'll ask. We miss you and it wouldn't be the same without you. Let's shock the world together again. But that's the last time he'll ask, right? Absolutely. I've had people that harass me like this. He should have just blocked the shock and stayed on T1. This is cyber harassment. I'm on my way, and sends a YouTube link.
Fan, I'm back and ready to shock the world again.
Prophet just needs a little bit more damage to get the bomb to stall this out. But
he's just chilling in bed. Bro, I love seeing videos like this, man, because a social media manager for the shock has said to ANS, hey, we want a video of you telling your fans how excited you are to be back and telling them you're going to shock the world again. And then he's just chilling in bed or like on a couch or whatever. And he's just like, yeah, fuck it. I'll record something chill.
I'm back and ready to shock the world.
I'm back and I'm ready to shock the world again. Sure, why not? And this social media manager or content creator or whatever for content manager for the shock is like, well, yeah, I guess I'll work. He's like, oh, fuck, he recorded it in portrait mode again, didn't he? Ah, never mind. He's a busy guy. I won't bother him. He is nasty, though. Just watching these clips again reminds me how insane he is. He was good enough to force hit scan when other people were running rush as well. It's as phoned in as your announcement of coming back to Cast Owl. Fuck off! Our announcement of coming back to Cast Owl was not phoned in. Fuck off! We had deleted scenes from that. That was a properly produced announcement. What is this tweet, huh? From Overwatch League?
Sorry, Shock. No ANS. No win. Sorry.
That's so funny. They recorded a trash talk video between Gladiators and Shock, and Moth didn't know that ANS was getting back on the team. That's so funny.
Sorry, Shock. No ANS. No win.
Oh, you poor little Lucio. You're going to get sniped. You're going to get sniped. And then Twilight's in the comments saying, no big goose, no win.